The Council of Veth had seen many things in their 10,000 years of recorded history. They had watched suns collapse into silence. They had mapped the cold bones of dead civilizations. They had catalogued 342 species of intelligent life, ranked them by threat level, biological complexity, and general capacity for surprise. Humans had scored a 2 out of 10 on the surprise index. 2 out of 10. Counselor Draven Zal, a being made mostly of translucent cartilage and very bad assumptions, had personally signed off on that assessment. He had reviewed the human files with the kind of bored confidence only a 10,000-year-old bureaucrat could manage. Bipedal. Fragile. Moderately clever. Emotionally unstable. Threat level, negligible. He would spend the rest of his very long life regretting that paperwork. The first contact mission was supposed to be simple. Routine, even. The Veth had done it before, 217 times. You land. You observe. You introduce yourself with carefully pre-translated greetings. The species either cowers, cooperates, or cries. Sometimes all three. You take notes. You leave. Scout Commander Preth was given the assignment because he was reliable. Not brilliant. Not adventurous. Reliable. He filed reports on time. He never broke protocol. He had an excellent attendance record spanning 4 centuries. The council liked Preth very much, in the same way that people like a very dependable chair. He took his crew of 12 and landed on the planet the humans called Earth, in a region the locals called a national park, on a Tuesday afternoon in late summer. The air was warm. The trees were green. A small bird sat on a branch and made a sound that the translation unit could only describe as enthusiastic but purposeless. Preth ordered his crew to establish a perimeter and activated the cloaking field. Standard procedure. They would observe a small cluster of humans first, gather behavioral data, and then make contact when the window was optimal. The humans they found were a group of 5. A hiking party. 3 adults, 1 teenager, and 1 child who had been complaining about her shoes for approximately 40 minutes before the Veth found them. Her name was Mara Osei. She was 9 years old, 4 feet and 2 inches tall, and she had the energy of something that should not physically be possible in this universe. The Veth watched from behind their cloaking field with the calm, professional eyes of experienced researchers. For 3 minutes, everything was fine. Then Mara spotted a flat rock near the edge of a small ridge, decided it looked like a perfect jumping platform, climbed it without telling anyone, and leapt off with both arms spread wide. She caught air for approximately 1 second. She landed in a pile of dry leaves with a sound like a small explosion. She stood up, leaves in her hair, and said, "I'm a hawk." The Veth did not understand hawks. Their translation unit processed the word, found a loose equivalent in their own language, and delivered the following result to Preth earpiece. "I am a creature of prey that strikes from above." Preth went very still. Behind him, junior analyst Sofen whispered, "Sir, did the small one just announce itself as a predator?" "I heard it too," Preth said. They watched Mara climb the rock again. She jumped again. She caught more air this time, arms still spread, coat billowing slightly in the wind, and landed further into the leaves with an even louder crash. She stood up again. "Better," she said, to no one in particular. The translation unit, doing its very best with limited context, delivered the following to the crew's earpieces. Improvement confirmed. Strike range extended. The entire crew went silent. One of the adults in the hiking group, a tall man named Jerome, called out, "Mara, stop jumping off things." Mara looked at him. She looked back at the rock. She looked back at Jerome with the expression of someone who had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the conversation to end. "One more," she said. Jerome rubbed his face. "One more," he agreed, because he was a reasonable man who had learned which battles were worth having. The translation unit processed this exchange and delivered. The larger unit has granted permission for an additional aerial strike. Sofen Brew made a sound that was the Veth equivalent of a gulp. Preth had filed 217 first contact reports. He had never once considered that the first creature to break his composure would be 9 years old, 4 feet 2 inches tall, and absolutely convinced she was a hawk. He opened his communication line back to the council. "Counselor Zal," he said. "Report," said Draven Zal, sounding very bored. "I need you to revise the threat assessment." There was a pause. "Which species?" Preth watched Mara climb the rock a third time, despite the agreement, while Jerome was looking the other way. "All of them," Preth said. "Sir," Sofen whispered urgently, pointing at his scanner, "her bone density is significantly lower than ours, her muscle mass is negligible compared to even our weakest crew member, and she keeps doing this voluntarily." Preth nodded slowly. "Update the file," he said. "Category unknown. Threat assessment, pending." The Council of Veth had a very specific protocol for situations that fell outside normal parameters. It was a 47-page document. Preth had read it twice during his training, back when he still believed that 47 pages was enough pages to cover anything that could possibly happen in this universe. He was now learning, with great personal discomfort, that nobody on the committee had ever met a 9-year-old human girl with a rock and an agenda. Mara had jumped off the rock 6 more times. The agreement with Jerome had been forgotten, revised, renegotiated, and ultimately abandoned. She had since moved on to a fallen log, a small hill, and what appeared to be a moderately sized boulder that made every single Veth crew member hold their breath simultaneously. She landed every single time. Not gracefully. Not with any visible technique. She landed the way something lands when it has absolutely no respect for the concept of gravity, and gravity, for reasons nobody could explain, had decided to let it slide. Sofen Brew was updating his scanner notes so fast his fingers were blurring. "Sir," he said, voice very tight, "I have been running calculations. At her size and estimated bone density, that last landing should have resulted in a fracture of at minimum 2 lower limb bones." "And?" Preth asked. Sofen looked up from his scanner. "She is now doing it again. With a running start." Preth closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he opened them, because closing them felt like giving up, and Preth had a 4-century attendance record to protect. "Log it," he said. "Under what category?" Preth thought about it. "Biological anomaly. Subcategory, deliberate." The hiking group had settled near a small stream for a rest. Jerome and the other adults were eating something wrapped in flat bread, having a conversation about something called a mortgage, which the translation unit processed as a binding agreement that causes sustained psychological suffering over many years. The teenager, a boy named Kojo, was sitting on a rock staring at a small glowing rectangle. He had not looked up in 40 minutes. The translation unit had captured 3 fragments of his speech, all directed at the rectangle, all of which translated roughly as, "No, no, no," followed by a sound of deep personal betrayal. The Veth had noted the glowing rectangle before. They had assumed it was a communication device. A weapon, possibly. Some kind of navigational tool. It appeared to be none of those things. Kojo's suffering seemed entirely self-inflicted. He kept touching the rectangle, suffering, and then touching it again. Crew member Dalavas, who handled xenopsychology, leaned close to Preth and said, very quietly, "I believe the adolescent is torturing itself voluntarily." "Add it to the file," Preth said. "Next to Mara's entry?" "Right next to it." Then Mara sat down beside Kojo, looked at the glowing rectangle, and said, "Let me try." Kojo handed it over with the expression of someone passing a live problem to someone else, and Mara began touching the rectangle with the focused intensity of a surgeon. Within approximately 90 seconds, she made a sound of sharp triumph, handed it back, and stood up. Kojo stared at the rectangle. "How did you do that?" he asked. "I just jumped on the guy," Mara said, and walked back toward the boulder. The translation unit delivered this exchange faithfully and completely to Preth Gall's earpiece. She resolved the conflict using the same technique she applied to the terrain, Sofen said, in the tone of someone whose worldview was being rearranged against their will. "She jumped on the problem," Preth said. "Metaphorically, yes. She jumped on an actual boulder 20 minutes ago." "Literally, yes." Preth stood in silence for a long moment. Around him, his crew of 12 highly trained, multi-century experienced Veth scouts were watching a 9-year-old human eat a snack, brush leaves off her coat, evaluate the boulder with fresh eyes, and begin climbing it again. She reached the top. She stood there. She spread her arms wide. Jerome said, "Mara, I swear to every star in the sky." Mara jumped. She caught more air than any previous attempt. Her coat spread behind her. For one full second, she was suspended against the blue sky of this loud, warm, chaotic little world, arms out, leaves falling below her, completely unbothered by the physics of the situation. She landed. She rolled once. She stood up, entirely intact, and said simply, "Yeah." The whole crew was silent. Then Dalava said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Sir. She has no wings. She keeps doing it anyway." Preth Gall opened his communication line to Counselor Draven Zal for the second time that afternoon. Zal answered immediately, sounding considerably less bored than before. Word of the revised threat assessment had apparently moved quickly through the council chambers. "Give me your current status, Commander," Zal said. Preth watched Mara begin climbing the boulder for the second time in 4 minutes. "The small one," Preth said, "is approximately 9 rotations old by their calendar. She weighs less than our standard field equipment. She has no biological enhancements, no external tools, and no apparent survival training." "And the threat assessment?" Preth took a long breath. "She keeps throwing herself off elevated surfaces, Counselor. Not because she has to. Not because something is chasing her. Not because her survival depends on it." He paused. "She does it because she wants to see if she can go further than last time." There was a very long silence on the council line. "That is," Zal began, "the most dangerous thing I have encountered in 4 centuries of field work," Preth finished. "Yes." Another silence. "What do we do?" Zal asked. Preth looked at his crew. Sofen was still typing. Dalla was still watching. Every single one of them was leaning slightly forward, completely unable to look away. "We file the report," Preth said. "And we update every threat index we have ever published." "To what level?" On the boulder, Mara reached the top, spread her arms, and looked out across the trees with the expression of someone who owned this entire planet and simply had not gotten around to telling anyone yet. "Unknown," Preth said. "We are not equipped to put a number on this." He closed the communication line. He watched Mara jump. She went further than last time. Of course she did. Friends, if you are enjoying our videos and want to watch new and exciting sci-fi and HFY stories every day, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure to turn on the bell icon so you never miss any of our latest uploads. Like the video and share it with your friends as well, so our community can continue to grow and bring you even more amazing content.